preseason polls. They're starting to come out. You look at the season openers for next year. I mean, Texas, Ohio State right out the gate. That's probably going to be a 1-versus-2 matchup. A lot of people, and we'll see what happens in the portal season. We'll see, God forbid, who doesn't get hurt throughout spring ball, what changes are made through the offseason. But right now, most people have Texas, Ohio State 1 and 2 in their preseason polls. Texas, Ohio State play right out the gate. Notre Dame at Miami, resurrecting the whole Catholics versus convicts thing. LSU, Clemson, Iowa State, Kansas State. That's going to be in Ireland. That's what really makes that one a little bit intriguing. Alabama, Florida State, the game that is 2 years too late. Syracuse versus Tennessee. TCU versus North Carolina. Bill Belichick. North Carolina is somehow favored in that game. Like what? How? Have you looked at their recent histories? I know TCU wasn't as good, since they won the national title, but still, that's the Bill Belichick little boost right there, I think. Auburn at Baylor. Utah, UCLA, which is no longer a Pac-12 matchup. It's now a Big 12 versus Big 10 matchup. South Carolina and Virginia Tech are going to play in Atlanta. You look at some of these polls that have already come out. And I'm going to kind of skip to the end of the On3 poll. Because at number 25 is Nebraska. And I want to get Jake's thoughts on this real quick. But when I saw this, Jake, you go first. I definitely have a reaction to this. When you see Nebraska, not every poll, like you look at another AP poll, preseason poll that I saw, I see Colorado is 25th going into next year, and Nebraska is nowhere to be found. And you look at this poll that I currently just referenced, Nebraska's 25th, Colorado is nowhere to be found. So it's going to vary. But just seeing Nebraska football preseason ranked, I have thoughts. But Jake, what is your immediate reaction to that?
Well, I think that it somewhat makes sense as far as like where the program's going, the belief in Matt Rule throughout the country. They're going to see this as a season 3. Dylan Raiola going into his second year, you usually get the biggest jump from freshman to sophomore year. So there's some things and reasons to believe that they should be in that conversation. And that's where I would have them, is in that conversation, somewhere between 25, 30. I don't know if I'd go quite as far as ranking, preseason ranking them. There's still a few questions, especially up front, offensive and defensively. You're getting new coordinators. But, I mean, again, that offensive coordinator hire, Dana Holgorsen, nationally, people are going to say, oh, that's good, raise Nebraska up. So, I see it. I know some people think it's too early. I don't think it will distract Nebraska. They were in the polls this past year, finished 7-6. I don't think it's necessarily something that's like, oh, we've made it type of feeling. But I do think it's a little bit premature. At the same time, I'm sure, whatever team you'd had 26 through 30, Colorado, they're going to have their obstacles too to get to the top 25.
You stuttered an awful lot in the beginning of your answer. I don't know how much conviction you had in the beginning of that answer. I don't know. That's just my initial I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Do I want us to be ranked? Yes. I want us to be undefeated playing for a national title. But as far as, and my God, these preseason rankings, what do they even mean? How much do they even matter? Especially as we sit here in January, most of it's just for fun. You kind of look ahead, you debate, you have fun. I get all that. I hate it. I hate it. You talked about, there's so many question marks. Offensive line, defensive line. We have over 30 DBs in the DB room. How much is that room alone going to change? We need the offensive line room to get some additions. We don't even have somebody running special teams. I was going to make a really mean joke about have we had someone there doing it lately. Anyways, but I won't say that joke. My point is simply this. I want to earn it. I want to fly under the radar. I want people to overlook us. I love off-season Kool-Aid. As you all know, my favorite flavor is red. We got 5 years in a row, off-season national champions, undefeated. I love all that stuff. But I like it more when it's banter, it's fun, there is some validity to it. I don't like seeing this. I don't like seeing it because I want to fly under the radar. I want to be overlooked. And more than anything, I want us to earn it. When it comes to legitimate hype and things of that nature, I've talked about how I'm excited about the portal additions on offense. And there's certain things I'm excited about on defense. And I laid out the concerns, the offensive line on offense. And I laid out the concerns on defense, which is we lost all 3 starters on the defensive line. A lot of it's in the trenches. We got some guys who are ready to play. Van Poppel, Judy, Lenhart, some of these other guys we brought in. All right. It's not like the cupboard is bare or anything. I think for me, for so many years, you hear these things, you see these things. The newest fad last year was, oh, look at the first 7 games. Check, check, check. Win, 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 win. I didn't like that. I didn't buy into it. For me, some of it's how the offseason goes. Some of it is justified. Matt Rule's year 3 typical jump, which he's already talked about. I love Dana Holgerson. I have flat out said he's the top 3 offensive coordinator in the country, maybe top 2, maybe number 1, depending on how you want to look at it. I actually think the people inside that building, when it comes to John Butler, are very happy. They are very happy inside that building. Outside the building, and I'm going to include myself in this, it's yet to be proven. But I know for a fact they're going to be much more cohesive as a coaching staff. There was conflict on that defensive side of the ball last year. They're going to be much more cohesive. They're happy with who they got. We'll see the results on the field before we decide. If we're happy out here, I'm optimistic, because if they're happy, that's got to be a good sign. I do think we're going to get an upgrade in special teams. Relatively optimistic on some of the names I'm hearing. Part of that is you've really only got one way to go, and that is to go up. With as much as we struggled on special teams, especially last year. That all being said, we have done nothing to earn this right. We got some monkeys off our back, so to speak. Finally beat Wisconsin. Okay? All right, it'd been a long time since we'd done that. Made a bowl game, won a bowl game, beat Colorado. There are several monkeys that we got off our back. Not one, but 2 one-score games last year. So there's several of these little stinking monkeys that are now off our back. But we still, I could also argue that we underachieved. As happy as I am that we got to a bowl game, beat some of the teams I mentioned, got the bowl win. The Ramir Johnson story in the bowl game was absolutely phenomenal. There's legit reason to be excited and optimistic in this offseason. Okay, I could still argue we underachieved. You look at the roster, talent-wise, we have a top 6 roster in the Big Ten. Didn't finish in the top 6. You look at the Illinois game. Go back and look at the first half stats. We dominated the first half. They made adjustments. We did not. They beat us in a game where all we have to do, I don't want to say all we have to do, is complete the pass to the tight end who's wide open, or snap the ball correctly so we can kick the field goal, which was very makeable. We don't do any of that, we end up losing. You look at the Iowa game. This is a game where we dominated all 3 facets of the game, almost all 3. 2 of the 3 facets of the game. And Iowa basically said, you know what? We're just not going to screw it up, but we're going to let them do it. And then it happened, unfortunately. You look at the end of the game, it's just a simple snap. Make the field goal, we're tied, we go into overtime. We probably win, I would say. There's 2 easy wins right there. You look at UCLA, we got outcoached on our home field by a head coach who'd never even been an offensive coordinator, let alone a head coach before. I'm not trying to be negative Nancy. What I am saying, the talent and potential has been there for a long time for Nebraska to win the Big Ten West way more often than not when there was 2 divisions. Couldn't get it done. Didn't get it done. Could have got it done. Didn't. The talent has been there for a while to win anywhere from 7 to 8 to 9 games on a consistent basis. Haven't got it done. Could have won 7 to 8 to 9 games last year. And yes, I am very happy with certain things that happened. Okay. I go into next year and I'm like, I don't want to see us anywhere near a preseason ranking until I see that we can snap a ball, until I see that we can block a little bit more consistently up front, until our secondary is a little bit more secure in the back end. We aren't going to give up almost on average 10 and 13 games, almost on average 1 block kick a game. Until I see we can do the little things, then I will say, oh, we're doing the basic little things. Now we've got a top 6 roster in the Big Ten. Now we can talk about winning 7, 8, 9 games. Now we can talk about being a top 25 team. I love the idea of us being a ranked team. I don't like the idea of us being a preseason ranked team because I simply want to earn it, because we haven't earned the right to be in that conversation consistently for years. The last time I felt we had relatively earned that right, and we didn't know what to make of Colorado at the time, is when we wwere beating Colorado 28-0 at halftime. And I'm like, all right, now we can be in this conversation. Had we come out and beaten Illinois and started the season, I believe we would have been 4-0 at that point with a win over Colorado and beaten Illinois, who was also undefeated at that point. Boom. That would have been the time. We've got to be able to do those little things. We got to find a way to get over the hump. I look forward to the day, because I believe we will, that we do it. Until then, I don't know how else to put it. I see all these kids that have stuff handed to them. Just handed to them. And everyone, parents, to each their own. I'm about earning things. And I want us to frickin' earn it so it's undeniable, so that when we do become ranked, people don't call it a fallacy or a facade or a mirage, because that's happened too often. I don't know. Does that make sense, Jake? Is that fair? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I like the thinking there, and I know a lot of a lot of people are going to respond the same way. And I think the goal needs to kind of be transition. Again, Nebraska did flirt in the side the top 25, here at 25th. And again, I'm fine with that conversation, because I think that's about where they belong. But what you're talking about is stepping up. Don't try to be 24th or 25th. Get up in the top 10. Get in that top 15. A program that's consistently up there. And of course, there's a lot of things, like we said, that they have to do to kind of get over that hump and finish these games. But that's really, to me, kind of that next step is top 25. That's fine. Let's boost, jump back up in there. Now, again, it's appearing in there at one time of the year. It would be great to finish in the top 25. I don't care if it's 24th or 25th next year. I'd almost sign up for it just to make sure it happens. But I think in order to get kind of past that level, you got to aim a little bit higher.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I want to see us ranked. I just don't want to see it in the preseason until we can do basic things. It's like a kid. I coached a kid in basketball years ago. Oh my gosh, the kid could shoot. Couldn't dribble, couldn't make a layup to save his life. He was better at making three-pointers than he was making layups. And he goes, "I'm just the best basketball player ever." I'm like, "You're one of the best shooters I've ever seen." And he looked at me and he goes, "What about basketball player?" I was like, "You're a great shooter. You're not a great basketball player, with all due respect." Like, you got to be able to do the basic, simple little things. Snap, block, tackle, protect your punter or kicker. Then we can talk about how good we are as a football team. That's how I look at it. So briefly, I want to look back at the final AP top 25 poll. I don't have a whole lot of beef with just about any of this. And then we will actually look at the top 10 briefly before we go into break here. But here it is. All right. Number one from this past season, AP, number one team in the country, Ohio State, Notre Dame. No problem there. I was wondering where they were going to put Oregon. They were undefeated. They were number one. They absolutely got waxed in the Rose Bowl by a team they'd already beat. They put Oregon at number 3. I have no quarries with that. Texas at number 4. I have a quarry with that. Not that any of this really matters, but it is fun to talk about. Penn State at 5. That's okay. Georgia at 6. That's where my quarry is. I'm like, wait a minute. Texas has the same amount of losses as Georgia, yet Georgia beat Texas twice. Texas did not win the conference championship. Georgia did, yet Texas is 4th. Georgia is 6th. We don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but Arizona State is at 7. I like that they showed the Sun Devils some respect there. Boise State as well, who I actually think, considering the 24-day layoff and all 4 teams who had a 24-day layoff went 0 for 4, I actually thought Boise State played Penn State fairly well. What if they'd have played up in Boise? What if they wouldn't have had the extended layoff? That game could have even been more interesting. Tennessee 9, Indiana 10. I don't really have an issue with any of this. My thing is Texas and Georgia being swapped doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Does anything else stick out to you, Jake?
No, not necessarily in that top, but it is interesting, like you said, kind of how much they care about the playoffs. And obviously this AP is voted on, so it's different for every person. But that is kind of interesting. Oregon, it's hard for me not to say that's probably the second best team throughout the nation, if not the best team.
Would you take them or Notre Dame head to head if they were to play? Who'd you pick to win?
Especially a beat up Notre Dame, Oregon. But even like full strength, probably go Oregon.
Yeah. Okay. Beyond that, anything else?
No, nothing in the top 10 except for I know it's not the biggest deal now that they finished with the loss, but Indiana in the top 10. Let's not forget how crazy that is to stay in college football.
And here's the thing the SEC did all this whining, moaning, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. We talked about it in the past. Ole Miss dominated in their bowl game. Indiana, by the way, played Notre Dame closer than Notre Dame's next opponent, which was Georgia. But Indiana kind of got mollywopped a little bit by Notre Dame, yet the pollsters still kept Indiana in front of Ole Miss. That has to be a statement. Am I the only one who gives a crap about that little statement that was made right there? No, Ole Miss, you still didn't belong in the playoff. All right, before we get to break, well, you know what? We might do the Matt Rule thing after we come back from break. Okay, I want to look at the way too early college football preseason poll, just the top 10. And so if you look at the teams with the best odds to win the national title, it's Ohio State, okay, plus 450, Texas plus 650, Oregon plus 650, tied with Texas, and you got Georgia, Penn State, Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame has a lot of people coming back. It was interesting because I hadn't thought about it till you mentioned the comparison to TCU, and what was the other team you mentioned? Washington, as far as national championship runner-ups. And I actually did a little bit of digging on that. They have their top 2 running backs coming back, which, by the way, were the top 2 running backs in yards after contact in the country. Number 1 and 2 in the freaking country. Yet they only had 7 carries in the national title game, and Riley Leonard had 9 carries in the first drive of the national title game. I'll never understand that. But they're back. Basically, they're back in the trenches. It's their quarterback they're going to have to figure out. But they had so many freshmen and sophomores on that field in the national title game, it was almost kind of crazy. And Ohio State was very senior laden. Now, Ohio State's going to have the best offensive player in the country coming back, Jeremiah Smith. The best defensive player in the country coming back, Caleb Downs. Not a half-bad start. But I'm going to talk about the next segment a little bit after we talk about Matt Rule having a little bit of fun at Paul Feinbaum's expense. But Ohio State, they had 8 returning guys on defense last year because they spent $20+ million on NIL and on NIL. But really, they brought in Will Howard, Caleb Downs, Quinshon Judkins. The other basically $20 million plus of that, almost $20 million was spent on keeping guys from going to the NFL, which is why they were so experienced. And I would talk about the roster, the talent plus experience. They had 8 returning starters on defense a year ago. They don't have that this year. All right, they're going to be missing a lot of key pieces. They're still going to be really good, probably preseason number 2, like I mentioned. All right, look at this preseason poll. All right, from On3. Texas is number 1. People love Texas, and a lot of it has to do with the Arch Manning bump. Okay, Ohio State's number 2. You might be missing a lot of people. They got to find a new quarterback. They got some guys waiting in the wings, I might add. But you still got the best offensive player in America, best defensive player in America coming back. That's a pretty good start. Oregon, number 3. Penn State. People think really highly of Penn State. Drew Aller is back again. Katron Allen, Nate Singleton, who have basically started at Penn State for the past 3 or 4 years, both at running back, are both back. The majority of their defense is back. Their offensive line is back. For the love of all that's holy, can they find somebody else who can catch a football? You know, their leading receiver on the season was their tight end, Tyler Warren. Their next 2 top receivers or pass catchers were their 2 running backs. Against Notre Dame in that loss, you know how many catches their wide receivers had combined in that game?
I remember.
0. Are you freaking kidding me? 0. 2 years in a row, they can't throw the ball. So people are mad at Drew Aller for throwing that interception at the end. I'm like, he's got nobody open. There's no threat downfield. Yes, they had the one speed guy whose name escapes me at the moment that burned Boise State a couple times, but that's the only time I saw that all year. Penn State is easily a top 3 team with everyone they have coming back if they can have a wide receiver or 2 emerge, just be halfway decent. They haven't had one in about 3 years. Notre Dame at 5 and Georgia at 6. Okay, I saw this earlier. I'm going to skip past 7 and come back to it in a minute. 8 is South Carolina. 9 is Florida. You know, Florida played 8 of the top 30 teams in the country last year. 8 of them. Most brutal schedule ever. Clemson, they got Cade Klubnik coming back. They're starting quarterback. At number 7, it's a Big Ten team. I'll give you a hint. Who do you think it is, Jake?
Michigan?
They're 12th.
Okay.
I've already said Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. You know Nebraska's not 7th.
Now I feel silly.
Indiana's 23rd. Illinois is the number 7 team in the country, according to this poll.
Whew.
I'll show you. You can look at the picture. I'm not making this up. When I saw that, I about fell over. I was like, holy Moses Malone. What is going on there? All right. Other than Illinois, Auburn's 11. That was the other kind of surprise.
Is that Brett Bielema doing the polling? Or what?
Oh, man. He's in charge of the Big Ten coaches chain text. Maybe he's
That's
like,
right.
Hey, guys, we're going to be number 1. Illinois, other than that, I really don't have a quandary with any of these teams. It's obviously Big Ten. They're all Big Ten SEC teams except for Clemson at 10. And even you go to the top 15, they're all Big Ten SEC teams with Auburn, Michigan, Tennessee, Alabama, LSU, until you get to BYU and Arizona State at 16, 17, which is where the first Big 12 teams finally appear.